Welcome to Rediscovering Childhood. I'm Mireya Lopez, and through this podcast, I invite you into genuine conversations with parents, teachers, therapists, and experts who are rethinking how we raise and educate our children. We focus on practical tools you can use today to create deeper connections and more meaningful moments with the children in your life. And I'm so excited to welcome today's guest, Linsey Knerl. She's a working mother of 6 who has been homeschooling her own children for years, and she's here to show us that homeschooling isn't just possible, it's actually doable for any family, regardless of your schedule, your budget, or your educational background. Linsey is the author of Homeschool Hacks, published by Simon & Schuster, and she's spent nearly 2 decades as a content writer specializing in education technology and helping families navigate modern learning. She's not coming at this from a place of perfection. She is coming from the trenches of actually doing it while working, raising 6 kids, and making it all somehow function. Whether you've been curious about homeschooling, or you're currently homeschooling yourself and feeling overwhelmed, or you're just looking for fresh ideas on how to support child's learning at home, this conversation is going to give you actionable strategies you can use right away. Linsey is going to bust some myths and answers your biggest questions in relation to homeschooling, because that doesn't mean you're sacrificing your career, your sanity, or your child's social life. It's actually a really powerful thing we can do for our children. So, Linsey, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Very excited to get started. My first question, I want to know more about the moment you decided to homeschool your children. Bring us back to that moment and why.
Yeah, so it wasn't necessarily a moment, as it was, my husband and I were moving a lot. We were familiar with the daycare system. We didn't necessarily want to continue having our children be away from us all day long. We really liked having them around, and we felt like we were capable of, at least at those very young years, reading to them, counting blocks, all the things that they would have done in like a half day of kindergarten. And we felt like we should try it. We should just try it. We didn't know a lot of people that were homeschooling, but we had both gone to college to be educators, and we weren't necessarily thinking that that was the style of learning that we wanted for our own children. We ended up not teaching, and we were working opposite schedules. So one of us could always be home with our children. And we said, we'll try it 1 year. Compulsory age of homeschooling in our state was age 7. So we didn't have to make any decisions until 7. And so we were just kind of test piloting it and seeing what we thought about it before we had to make a decision for the state. And we just kind of renewed every year, said, you know what, this is still working. Let's keep doing it. And now my oldest is almost 27 and my youngest is 12, and they have never been in a public or private school system. They've always been homeschooled.
What did you notice having them at home that was beneficial for them in being in that environment?
So 2 things. 1, they were naturally very curious. So because when we would see something interesting or want to read about a topic or go somewhere, we had to do a little planning because we do work, but it wasn't something where you had to wait till Christmas break to go see that new museum that opened, or we had to wait until a Saturday after the ball game before we went to do our errands to fit in that, trip to go look for rocks. So it really was more, if they had a curiosity, we could nurture that and we could see it through. And then the other thing is they tend to have more self-autonomy. One of the things that was interesting is one of the first times my younger one went to a big group setting with a lot of children who had been in the public school was he noticed they were raising their hand and asking to use the restroom. And for my children who just were at home or maybe church or a co-op or another environment, they would just go, and they were trusted that they wouldn't, mess up the bathroom or do something crazy, and that they would come back and they would finish their work. So they had that sense of responsibility and autonomy which isn't always possible when you're in a classroom of 30 or 40 children and they're all very, very young children, and you can't possibly know what they might get up to in the bathroom. So there was that sense that they could take some ownership over their actions and their behaviors in a way that's maybe not possible in a larger school setting.
And how does that autonomy apply then for them in adulthood?
Yeah. So I think for college, we've really seen some things I didn't know would happen, but I'm very pleased with. And that is, they don't wait until. Now, we have some children that are more tendency to procrastination. That's personality. But there's not this assumption that they can't go talk to a professor about a question that they have. They take advantage of office hours. They take advantage of the extra study sessions. They understand that, if they don't get a grade that is what they wanted, that it's on them to have to go and ask for extra credit or try to understand what it was they didn't get, so that the next time they take a test that they're a little more prepared. And this is even for my one adult student who he has dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia. He's struggled a lot to just be able to do his schoolwork and not be burdened by all the different things he has to do to accommodate. So this has been good, I think, for my kids to just know people aren't going to do the work for you.
Mhm.
You can get help, but it's up to you to ask for that help. You need to seek out that help. And if you're not finding what you need, or you need even further help, your parents are always here. Your family's always here. One thing we did right, and we did a lot of things wrong. We're parents, we're not perfect. And so we tried to make sure there was always open communication, and that even though my children may not have excelled at everything, they could always come to us and we would work something out as a family. We would figure it out. And I think that's been one of the biggest joys of choosing to homeschool.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so empowering as well. I suppose it brings that confidence in themselves and trust themselves that if they know what they want, and they find their own way of getting it and asking questions and just not taking a no for an answer, because then you get nowhere. You talk about curiosity. So from the moment you observe your child and you identify what they're interested in, or that strong passion that they have of what they want to know, how do you take that from there in a homeschooling environment?
So there are a lot of ways. And, my children are big readers, which makes it easier. I was a reader very young age, reading at age 2. My husband started reading a lot later. We have a range of abilities. Again, with the dyslexia, we had one child that wasn't really reading solidly until almost 10 or 11. That hasn't deterred him. He loves to read. It takes him a lot longer, but he'll sit down with a big history book, and that's a great time for him. So I think for them, it has been trying to figure out where their passions and interests match up with their gifts and their abilities. So I have one son who really loves cats. He talks about them constantly. It's a little bit of an obsession. I know that sometimes I might tire hearing about it, but I've used that as kind of his fuel for the engine that he needs to do hard things. So he wants to draw cats all day long. You can draw cats at the bottom of your math worksheet if you get all the even number problems done. That's something maybe in a public school you wouldn't be able to draw cats all over your worksheet. We don't have time, and there's a standardization. The other thing is, we have speech and debate. That's a requirement of our children. We want them to be able to speak publicly and have ideas go back and forth respectfully in the public square. And their first speech that they have to write is very intimidating. And often that is about a topic that they're passionate about. If I can get my 12-year-old to write a speech about the 5 best breeds of cats, that's something he's excited to tell people about. And so it makes that speech writing a lot easier for him, for an otherwise very difficult thing to get a 12-year-old to do. So we use those passions as a way to fuel so they can do hard things. We use them as rewards. And also, it's just a really great way to get to know your child, who they are, how they were made, and potentially what they might want to do in the future for a career.
Yeah, that's incredible. And how often we become so busy with our own work, our own life, to really pay attention to that and to realize that they are their own person. they're not an extension of us. They're not the solution to our unmet needs or
Right.
childhood dreams. They're their own person, and to get to know them in a deeper level and to really respect that, that's extremely powerful. And that's the time you get when you spend time with them homeschooling. You really get to know them, and that's just beautiful. Is there a difference homeschooling boys and homeschooling girls?
I have very little experience with that because I just have the one daughter, and she was our first and our experiment in homeschool, if you will. And she always was kind of outdoors, helping my husband put fence up, helping with the animal chores. It wasn't until she got a little bit older, 15, 16, she really wanted to do homeschool prom, go to dances, a lot more social things that maybe girls would be interested in, girls' sports, those sorts of things. I think it's less about maybe boys versus girls and more just understanding the energy levels and the energy needs of the children. I have one boy he would be happy to lay underneath a blanket and read all day long and never talk to anybody. He loves his books. And then I have another that wants to go, go, go and meet his friends all the time and be everywhere and do all the things. And I think that has been a little bit more of the challenge in finding out when you're a family who has maybe one vehicle and limited budget, what kinds of enrichment activities we can do that meets all of the children's needs, because you can't pay for everybody to do their own sport, and we don't have enough time to drive back and forth to all the things, so we have to reach a bit of a consensus. I think that's been more. And, for boys growing up in this world, they're hearing a lot of conflicting messages. You need to be more masculine. You need to be less masculine, just depending on what they're seeing in the media. And girls, too, hear similar messages. So I think it's just kind of tempering that with some assurance that they are made the way that, there's nothing wrong with their temperament, the way, if they're more outgoing, that's okay. There's just things we will have to work on to make sure we can meet the demands that are made of us in the workplace or in relationships.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And you talk about, for example, a child who would just stay all day wrapped up in a blanket reading books. How do you push them out of their comfort zone? Where do you find that balance between what they're comfortable? Because obviously they're in a home environment, so
Mhm.
they would feel really comfortable. But you also probably need to push them a little bit out of their comfort zone to really help them reach their potential. So how do you do that?
Yeah, so for our family, it really was speech and debate because it was an activity that we found that regardless of their physical strengths or giftings, everyone should be able to get up in front of an employer or at a wedding or whatever it is and be able to deliver a speech and not panic or throw up or like any of, I think I read that public speaking is the number one fear above like snakes or being like buried alive. I mean, that's pretty powerful when you think that, so many adults are walking around unable to get up and just make their case for keeping their job or getting a job or sharing about a project that they're working on. So we decided to make that a priority for our homeschool. And in that activity, they meet all sorts of kids from all kinds of backgrounds. The boys give speeches with the girls. There's a lot of socialization, a lot of fun activities that they do. And that's been good for us to kind of manage and balance our resources. For other people, it might be sports or athletics. I think, it's a lot different than it was 25 years ago with homeschooling, where it was illegal in a lot of places. And so they were forced to stay inside their houses, and it might have made them a little bit awkward because when you're always worried, you can't go shopping during the day or someone might come arrest your parents. Of course, that's going to make for some possibly awkward, quote unquote, children. Now we don't have those same kinds of limitations in many parts of the world. And so we have really no excuse to hide in the house all day. We can go out. There's so many activities, homeschool specific, and just I think a lot of the schools even allow some homeschoolers to come in and do select activities. We don't have the barriers. So it's really on the parents to make that happen. And we can't use, being thrown in jail as an excuse. We need to get out there and do
Which
what we
is a
need to
great
do.
excuse, to
Yeah,
be
it
fair.
is. It is. And there are still places, of course, where that is But even video classes, and if my son wants to interview somebody in a specific field that works in California and we live in Nebraska, which is days of travel for those who are not from the States, we can just schedule a Zoom call and have that back and forth. And the limitations are just so few these days. So we really don't have excuses to not help our kids develop those relationships and that networking.
Yeah, that's incredible. Talk to me about socializing. Give us some examples on how homeschool kids can socialize. What opportunities would you have?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of opportunities slash challenges. One of the benefits of, I think, homeschooling is that mixed age groups are very common. They'll go into a co-op, or employment is very common. You know, if you're not in school all day and you get your schoolwork done, you could go work a job. You're learning how to interact with not just 30 other kids of your same age, but younger kids and older kids and grown-ups. And there's this sense that they can move freely between groups and not overthink. You know, we were at the college with my son and we took some of his friends out for lunch, and it was a very natural thing. It wasn't like, we got to go sit with the parents. You know, the parents are kind of moving the pieces and helping the children find their opportunities. And so it's less of this, grown-ups are here, kids are here, we're against each other in the world. It's more like we're partners in exploring and getting opportunities. So socialization can look like that. But also for peer groups, again, it's around those interests and those activities. A lot of my children have made lifelong friendships with the kids that they maybe didn't like initially in a formal debate competition, because it was their competition, and they've just learned to respect each other and kind of be in awe at what the competitor can do, and learn from each other that way. So there's really, like I said, there's proms, there's sports, there's volunteer activities, there's classes that they can go and take together, art and dance and karate. I mean, it's the same sort of thing you would see with a public schooler. Instead of waiting till after school or Saturdays to do the activities, they're kind of spread out more throughout the week, and they gain their friendships in those groups like any other kid would.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I love the word you use, partnership. Partners, they between adults and children and other children. It's just that cooperation and supporting each other. That's really positive, and empowering them for life and for the real world as well, not just for an exam or for a test at the end of whatever it is. It's just really learning from life for life. And that's very powerful. You talked about reading earlier,
Mhm.
and how important it is to read books. And, for our parents, say someone listening now, say, my child won't read a book. They hate reading books. They won't sit still. They won't read a book. Is it really that important? And how do I create that love for reading? And why should I do that?
Yeah, so it's something that really is easier if you start young. Books as part of the household. I know we've really moved to this place where we want a minimalist household. I think that's kind of taking a shift. I see a lot of very young families with books everywhere, not so much concerned about how their home looks, but whether it functions as a place that, you can be safe and learn and interact with family members. But it is really reading to the child very, very, very young and modeling that. We may like to read a lot of things on our Kindle or a computer or our phone, and it is still reading. I don't dispute that that's reading, but the message it sends to the child is that I want to spend more time on my device than
Mm.
reading a book. So I do try to make sure I'm always reading a physical book. My husband's reading a physical book. And then my husband, when I used to work evenings, he would read a book to the children, all of them together, every night, a longer book, classic stories or newer, interesting stories, chapter books, and would get the kids to settle down at night. And we did that till they were almost maybe 12 years old. And we picked books that kids are just going to like. And that was really a great time to just reconnect as a family, put the day behind us. My kids can now rattle off a lot of their favorite books, and they're the things that my husband read to them when they were young. And I think that looking towards a curriculum or a learning program that prioritizes whole standalone literature pieces instead of maybe a textbook where you get 2 paragraphs of a Dickens novel or 2 paragraphs of a this, and it's more analysis and less actually enjoying the text. I think that that's important as well. And, if your kid doesn't love reading and they've made it to 12, 13, 14 and they still hate books, find the one thing they love. I've known a couple of young men with dyslexia that hate reading, but they will read these adventure books about snakes over and over and over again, front to back. It's okay to let them read the same book over and over and over again and obsess over the same topic. They're reading. I think that's just a win because as a grown up, I want to read books I enjoy. I don't read not for fun. So learning how to read for fun is just as useful a skill as learning how to analyze some literature that maybe you won't use again because you only do that during schooling. And in life, you are reading for fun or reading for information based on your own curiosity. So don't discourage that.
Yeah, that's so true. I used to love reading as a child until in secondary school they made me read certain books that I didn't like. And then I had just made that association between reading these books and I don't like reading. And I stopped reading. And it's really, really sad. As you said, reading is reading. So, and we read for the love we have for the books, for what we learn from how we feel when we're reading those books. So if we feel bad, why would we want to read that?
Right. And there's some programs we've used, you learn as a homeschool, as a parent in general, you're going to learn and grow and adapt and look back and say, wow, that wasn't a good choice, or I really wish we hadn't done that. That's okay. Like you're learning as well. I think, we had this great world-class curriculum with our children and they had to read these amazing books. And then at the end, they had to answer like 100 questions and write a paper and do this. And those are all very useful skills. But I told my husband, I said, I've picked out 5 books this year that I just love so much that I would love my children to also love. And I don't want to ruin it by making them write a paper. And I don't want to ruin it by asking them 100 questions about character perspective or thesis. I just want them to sit in it and, like you said, feel it and know what it is to truly read and be part of a story. And I think that has made a difference. Don't turn everything into a lesson. Let the reading be the lesson.
Yeah, that's really good to just be able to see that. I'd like to ask you, how has homeschooling your children changed you as a
Yeah, it's changed me in one, it's helped me really forgive and forget maybe some of the mistakes my parents made growing up that I might have been bitter or resentful
resentful?
about because I am not. So there's never any disrespect, or I would never look down on anyone who doesn't homeschool. First of all, super personal choice. I think it's wonderful if you can because I've seen so many benefits. I would love to see that for more families, but every family is dealing with their own boundaries and their own obstacles. And so this isn't to say you can't get these things also by not homeschooling. But for me, if my kids were gone at school, come home tired, I'm tired from working, we just have a couple hours at night and we're doing a homework and getting ready for the next day, I don't know that I would get the opportunity to go through the cycle of making a mistake with my child, having them forgive me, work through it with me. We start fresh and we say, you know what? I'm a better parent now because I did that. It's such a high rate of iteration from, things happen faster when you're together every day. And so we've worked through a lot of things in a very short period of time that at 47, I can say, wow, I understand where my parents might have been coming from, or parenting is really actually very hard, or I need to be more compassionate to my neighbor who's struggling with this because we're doing like years and years and years of parenting in months because we're together so much. And so I feel like I've arrived at a place of accepting my parents and their choices, even if I didn't agree with them. I've come to a place of feeling more confident as a parent, as a person, as a woman, because you're going through these cycles of ups and downs at such a rapid pace because you're together all the time. And I actually think that's been great for me as a human. I like where I'm at in life right now. And I think that the challenge of homeschooling has brought me to a place faster than I might have otherwise. I've had to make less selfish choices, and I'm actually grateful for that.
That's so wonderful to hear. And I do agree. I think we all agree that parenting is really hard, but I like to take those challenging moments as learning opportunities for myself to reflect on how I react, how I respond, how I do things, how I feel when something triggers me. And that's making me a better person. So, yes, it's hard, but best things, best things in life come from those moments of challenge and how we overcome and the person we become after, we've passed that challenge and what we've learned in that process. So that's what you just said there. It's just beautiful. But how would you make sure you make time for yourself as well? Because I think it's important, especially being with the kids all day.
Yeah. So when, I'm a business owner, so we have our ups and our downs. Some years are better than others. In the better years, when it wasn't as big a deal, my husband would book a hotel for me for the night and say, go. I'm a writer for business, but I also like to work on novels that I never show anybody. And he said, you should just go work on your book and spend some time at the hotel and order sushi or whatever you want to do and just take a moment. And that would be something that I would do to take time for myself. But now that, this is a year where the budget's a little tighter and I've got three in college, it's not as practical for me to go do that. So time for myself has been really, I think, again, reading. I'm a big reader. So I will tell my children, I'm going to go read for 20 minutes. Don't bother me unless the house is on fire, because my husband's home, but for some reason they still like to come to mom for a lot of things. It's just how it is. I also have tried to do more physical movement, which I've never been an athletic person or enjoyed sports, but I do live on an acreage in the middle of the plains of Nebraska. There are a lot of beautiful places to walk to. So for my own health, so that I can be around for a long time for my children, I try to go for a walk every day, 20 minutes, just move my body. I find that really keeps my mental health in a good place. Movement is so powerful, even if it's not, running or treadmill or lifting weights, just moving. Those are two things I try to do. And then I have a friend that I try to get on a phone call with at least once a month, and we just kind of let out all of our grievances. She lives far away and she lets out all her grievances, and we have that kind of girlfriend time, I guess, that I don't always get. And you don't have to get together physically. I find that to be such a release valve for me personally. But for you, it's whatever. Just you can feel when you need to do it. If you can try to schedule it in for before you get to that point, I think it's better for everybody.
Yeah, anticipate that you will need time for yourself and then be connected to yourself to see really what works for you and then schedule it because it's not going to knock at your door. Hi, I'm
No.
time. I'm here for you. You really need to make it happen and just don't be afraid of asking whoever's beside you. I need an hour for myself. And yeah. And I like what you said about your friend as well. It's that find your tribe. We all need
Mhm.
our person or our community or that we can share that they understand what we're going through and we can turn our challenges into something that we laugh at and just, get through it together. It really makes a difference. So when it comes to teaching your children or setting activities, would you think it's important to have targets or milestones or contents or objectives that you need to achieve? Or is it all just let's see what the child wants to do and see where it goes?
Yeah, so obviously where you live may have some legal requirements of, you know, showing
Curriculum.
progress. Yeah, showing progress in areas every year. I don't live in one of those places, but I have tried to reverse engineer whatever it is my children think they might want to do. So if I have a student who is very science and math and wants to become an engineer, it's obviously not acceptable to get to grade 12 and we haven't learned multiplication. That's realism. So it's a combination of the bare minimum I think that they need to go out into the world in math, reading, and history to kind of know what's gone on and to be able to write and speak appropriately. And then if they have a certain interest, I don't want them to get to college or trade school or the work environment and be massively unprepared. That's not the point of this. So it's kind of looking ahead and saying, what does this college or university require? What tests do they require? What milestones do I need to set up? So every year we're getting closer to that. And children change their mind. My job as a parent, because I know them, because I see them every day, is to also say, this child hasn't told me they want to be a doctor, but they're obsessed with all these things that seems like it might be a fit. I'm going to make sure they have the math and the science down so that they can go take eventually the test that they need to get into school. So some of that is me also knowing and recognizing, hey, my child is geared towards this. I'm going to make sure that they have met the learning objectives needed so that they don't have the doors closed in their face, right?
Yeah, and that makes me think as well, parents who are not homeschooling, how important it is that little bit of connection every day through play, through reading books, through baking something or having a little conversation where you really get to know your child and bring them to the right activities for them. Not just football because you used to like football or basketball because all their friends are playing basketball and that's what you think they should do, but really that conversation. They like doctor, maybe there is a science weekend activity that they can go to. You hate science, but it's about your child, not about you.
Yep.
So that's really important as well. So, what's the biggest myth about homeschooling?
So there are actually two, and the one is socialization, but I think we've kind of covered that. Like there are so many opportunities. If anybody were ever to say to me they know an awkward homeschooler, I would ask them two questions. One, was this in 1980? Because again, many of them were hiding from the police, and I'm sure that was made them a little bit socially weary. The other is that a lot of children are brought home from school because they've been bullied or because they had social needs that weren't met in the school system. And so, of course, they're going to be awkward. Homeschooling didn't make them awkward. Homeschooling gave an awkward child a place to be safe and learn and build the confidence so that they could excel as grown-ups. So those are two correlation, causation, different things. But the other thing is that you have to teach everything or that you're not qualified to be a teacher. I don't teach most of the classes my children attend. They have online tutors. They take some virtual classes. I drive them to a place where they get taught by a debate coach. I connect them with someone who's leading a co-op. They are past the age of very little where we're working on handwriting and reading and spelling lists and basic math. I'm not teaching them. I don't teach calculus. And that's because it wouldn't make sense personally. I want my children to have teachers that are very passionate so they can at least respect the field, even if they don't learn to love it themselves. And we live in a world where we have connections to the most passionate, amazing instructors and teachers. I'm going to take advantage of that. And so I don't need to be qualified. The only thing I need to be qualified in is knowing my child, knowing the law, and being more of a curator of their educational, like a museum, curating the opportunities so that they can reach their full potential.
Yeah, you're just setting the connections between your child and the rest of the things, the pieces that they need to build that puzzle. Yeah. How would you keep that budget friendly? Do you have to pay every tutor? Like, it sounds really expensive.
Yeah. So, there are some online solutions that you pay once and you can use it multiple times for multiple children, or they have discounts for multiple children. If you live in like a more urban area, some of the co-ops are very affordable. It's $20 for a class, and your child drops in and they do ceramics, or they drop in and they dissect a frog. So there's a lot of those. But otherwise, I hate to say YouTube, but when I'm stuck on something and I don't know how to fix my air conditioner, or I don't remember how to do a certain math that I need to work on a project for a client, I get on YouTube. And while I don't feel children should have unfettered access to AI, I might ask an AI tool, how can I explain this to my child in a way that's accessible that a 12-year-old would understand. My favorite thing is to ask, like the AI, I don't understand the Pythagorean theorem. Explain it to me in a way that I could explain to my child using basketball metaphor, that sort of things. Information is so widely available that if you can find quality, authoritative sources, you don't have to spend a whole lot of money.
Yeah.
And books and libraries are so beneficial. Most of the people that have read my book have checked it out from the library. And I think that is amazing that families don't need to go spend $20-$25 to find out tips for homeschooling. They can go to their library. We need to use more of those resources, I think.
Yeah, I love that. The co-ops, is that something in your community that's very common? I haven't seen
Yeah.
that here actually.
Okay. So yeah, in the States, the co-ops have really blown up since the pandemic. We just have had so much
Okay.
growth. And it is parents saying, we're going to get together on Tuesdays or Thursdays for 3 hours and you get to pick a class, or maybe they do all 5 classes, but that's the time when the parents come together and they brainstorm ideas. Or maybe for science, it's where you do the lab, because every home doesn't have all the materials for labs recreate at home. We can come together and share resources, and we can watch the video together and have that classroom kind of experience. But it can look all different ways. And there's flexibility because we're parents. We don't have to jump through a lot of hoops. We just find a place that will host us, whether that's a church or a community center or a library. And we reserve the time, and we collect enough money to cover the expenses. And so it can be very affordable.
Yeah, it's great to build a community together as well, and it's incredible. And what you mentioned about AI as well, I think that's exactly what it is for, and that's the positive use of technology and AI with YouTube, or asking questions and all these things to really expand, because we can't be experts at everything.
Right.
So when you use it for the right purposes, and it's children learning, not just getting content into their brains, but learning how to learn. And I want something, I don't need to know everything right now.
Right.
And that's, I think, what school tries to do with the children, add content and content and content. Then they go out in the world. I always give the example of when I grew up in Spain, and I spoke Spanish, and then I came here and I studied Spanish for 13 years before coming to Ireland. And when I
Wow.
arrived in Ireland, I couldn't put a sentence together in English. I remember going to a place where I was sleeping, and it was like, "Me sleep here tonight." That's all I could say. So just because I learned English and I passed these tests doesn't mean I can actually speak English. So it's not about what I know, but how I use it in the real world. And I think that's really positive to teach them to use technology and AI for the right purposes when they need to use it, not just endless scrolling. And when we role model as well with our own example on how do I use this washing machine. Yeah. I'd like to ask you, when your children are homeschooled, it has a ripple effect then them in the society, in their own environment, because of the way they've been brought up. What do you think that is in comparison to children who have been in schools?
Yeah. So that autonomy we kind of talked about. I think that not all homeschoolers make great employees, but if it's the type of job where you need to be assertive, take initiative, not wait to be told the next thing to do, to look around and say, the dishes need to be done. I'm just going to go do those sorts of things. There's a sense of like problem solving as you go, having permission to go ahead and do the next right thing without waiting. Because, growing up in a school system, you stand in line by order of your name. You have to sit at a certain table. There's a lot of this waiting for the bell to ring, waiting for the teacher to call on you, waiting. And I remember getting in trouble at school because I would pull a book out and want to try to read. During that time I was spent waiting, I thought it was a waste of time. There's none of that. So you're learning to use time in a way that you're using every drop of it if you can. The other thing is just of respect for people of all ages, seeing the elderly as people, seeing babies as people, and not trying to categorize them as having value based on their usefulness to society, I think is also very nice too. Very lovely if you can get some volunteering experiences, because when you get to see grandma more or help care for an elderly neighbor, and not every homeschooler does this, but you have the opportunities. So people tend to do that. I think there's just a more well-rounded way of interacting with people, and you're not so categorized. When my children first went to a summer camp with a lot of public schooled kids, I was public schooled, and I told them, I said, they're going to ask you one of two questions. They're going to say, what grade are you in and what school do you go to? And I want you to be able to answer the questions. And they're like, why would anyone ask that? Those aren't important things. And sure enough, they did, because in the public schools, that's how you identify with your tribe, is based on grade and school. Other schools are bad. We're going to beat you in football. Other grades aren't as good. There's this sense of identity with your grade or your school that you don't necessarily have to do in homeschooling. And my kids didn't understand it, but then they saw it. So I think the ripple effect is the tribalism, or the identifying with your people, can look like activity-based, interest-based, values and moral-based versus age or what school you went to, which I think is maybe a more healthy way to do life.
Yeah, it's very eye-opening as well, and respectful, and makes better citizens and makes the world a better place. Would you have any really positive experience homeschooling that you remember that made a difference?
I actually think, it'd be my son that's in college now. He's finishing his finals right now, and he will be coming home for Christmas break. He was diagnosed very late, 18 years old, with the dyslexia and dysgraphia. And we had tried all the things. We'd tried all the home programs. We'd had him go to occupational therapy. What we really needed was a diagnosis, but they were like thousands of dollars. So we saved to do that. We made payments. And when he finally got diagnosed and it made sense, oh, this is why he struggled with this. I cried, and I felt like a really terrible parent, because he was 18 years old when we got the diagnosis. And I got tools and resources, and I said, you know what? I still think you can go to college. He wanted to go to school to be a therapist. But I would like to take a year so we can figure out what tools you might need to make this work. A year of just sitting in this and figuring it out. And because we homeschooled and we didn't have that pressure to follow our classmates from senior year of school, grade 12, directly to college, we could sit in that and figure it out. And we found the right college. We found the college that let him use the right tools, that, would accommodate him in a way that allowed him to take responsibility, didn't just make excuses for him. He is doing so well. And I think that it wasn't the year 1 through 12 that did that necessarily, but it was that freedom from having to do what everyone else is doing that allowed us to just sit in that and figure out what his next right step was. And also, I got to forgive myself as a parent, which was much easier because I had done it for 12 years. Homeschooling is a constant process of making a mistake and fixing it, and maybe not fixing it, and trying to be okay with it, and realizing you're not going to ruin your kid. There's always some time to work these things out. And for my son, it was at 18. But I'm so happy to see him thriving, and he's confident. He knows to go ask the professors for help, and he knows to go ask for any accommodation he might need. And he feels the confidence to do that because he has the autonomy that we gave him through homeschooling. And so I at least have that to look back and say, yeah, we did that for him.
Yeah, and you must feel really proud, because that's the best. I think that's the biggest gift we can give our children, is to love themselves and to respect themselves and to accept who they are and their limitations, and use them as opportunities to reach and to find their own success in their own way. So that's congratulations.
Well, thanks.
And for inspiring us all as well. I'd like to talk as well about, because you're an entrepreneur, you have your own business. So how do you combine both homeschooling, entrepreneurship? And I think it does merge really well. It gives you the flexibility with your time, but also you can involve children in a way, your kids, to be part of it as well, as a family project even.
Yeah, it's so funny how I know there's this big, and I guess if I worked for someone else, I maybe would demand a little bit more work-life balance. But if you think back to, my parents were farmers and their parents were farmers, and before industrialization where everyone went off to work, there wasn't a lot of, you're done for the day when you're done for when you lay your head down to sleep. And we just try to do work in a way that it's joyful. And that's not always the case, but we bring the kids in to help as we need the help, as many things as they can help with. And they've really, it's funny, my kids, they fill out their very first LinkedIn profile and they're putting things on there that they did for us. And I'm like, that's right. You did do that. Or you did learn how to organize all of our inventory, or you figured out how to send invoices or do whatever it is because we asked them. They come away with it with this like set of accomplishments and skills that a lot of kids right out of high school don't have with the family business. But we found that when we win as a business together, the kids really feel like they've won as well. They want to know what they can do to help. And I know some people say that's an unrealistic responsibility to put on children. Children have so many responsibilities and pressures today. Seeing the family business do well is a joyful responsibility, I think, if you do it correctly. And we really we try to figure out what's appropriate for them to know and help with. And as they get older, that's going to change. And, when my kids were babies, I was nursing them in a little carrier while I was typing away or doing calls. And I think since the pandemic, where everyone had to learn how to get on Zoom with the kids in the background, that kind of changed the world and changed how we view children and work. And for some people, it might be stressful, but I think it's actually quite beautiful because it took those barriers away that we felt like, I don't want to see your children. I don't want to know you have children. When I first started freelancing, people would say, don't let anyone know you have 6 kids. They'll think you can't do the work. And now when people hire me, they go, oh, you have 6 kids. You must know how to work. It flipped it upside down in a way that
perspective, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's really great for families and for just society as a whole.
Yeah, I agree. It's opened up at that door of acceptance and just turning weaknesses into strengths, really. Like I'm not gonna hire a stay-at-home mom, whether now I'm like, I need a stay-at-home mom because they're amazing. Yeah. So any moms, especially, or parents listening now, considering giving homeschooling a go because of whatever reasons are in the background, what would be the first step they could take?
Well, first of all, find out how to be compliant with whatever laws you have, right? Most places, especially in the States, if your child is, in danger, first of all, if your child is in danger for any reason, remove them immediately. Don't even think about what math curriculum we're going to use or how can I make this work. Like safety first. Be the parent
Safety means
first.
bullying or
Yep, yep.
any of those sorts. Yeah.
Yeah. If you have like threat of danger to your child, that's real. Like, don't even forget about everything you've read and just make that child be safe. Like you have permission to do that. The second thing then is to just start thinking about how you would like your school to look. And I don't mean like posters and a cute little shutout back that you paint. Like that's all nice, what you see on Pinterest. But really, what values, do you want reading to be like the core value? Do you want books to be the core? Do you want social interaction with other families to kind of be the core? You can build around those things. And then don't think you have to spend a lot of money. And it's funny because I'm in marketing, so I help companies sell to homeschoolers. So this kind of goes against what I do. But don't feel like there's a thing you have to buy right now that you build your homeschool around. Because a lot of times it doesn't work. It doesn't work for you or your kid or your time or your style. And then you've just spent a bunch of money. So see if you can't borrow something from a friend to try. Some libraries do offer homeschool materials to sample, and go online and see if like the class has some free 2-week trials so you can even see if your kid would sit in front of the computer that long. Try before you buy and start with just one subject at a time. Start with math if that's what your kid loves, and have them have a good association with homeschooling and school by picking their favorite subject, trying that for a few weeks, then add in a second thing. And if you are pulling them from homeschool or pulling them from school to homeschool, they might need just a couple weeks to process what they've been through, if it was traumatic, or just to figure out who they are outside of having to raise their hand to use the bathroom, right? That's kind of almost like a crisis for some kids to figure out who they are when they're not being told what they need to do. And that's okay too. That might be a good time to like go on a little mini family vacation or do a project at home where you figure out how you work together, and what your children's giftings and their preferred way of learning. There's kind of some exploration there. It's okay to just take some time as well.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And I think what you mentioned about starting with maths, it's just to also see that there is no maths without language.
Yeah.
There is no maths like it's all connected. So even if you start with a project, you want to learn about snails. Why snails only come out when it's raining, for example? I start with a question like that and then see what happens after that. But you can't teach that without language. You can't teach
Right.
that without reading, because you're going to have to research something. So to maybe not focus too much on pressure of I have to do the reading and now I have to do the maths, and now because it all really comes to you. You've probably experienced that it all comes to you if you just let it flow a little bit.
Yeah, you have to trust yourself, which is going to be the hardest thing, because you've told yourself for years that only a professional can do certain things, right? And teachers are great. Like they're good at what they do, which is managing large numbers of children at a time. You just have your child, and sometimes that can be more intimidating because there's no off switch. They're looking at you. You don't have the lesson ready for the day. Like you have to kind of be comfortable doing things on the fly too. And if you're a parent that hasn't done that in a long time, that's going to feel uncomfortable. But just give yourself a little permission to stumble. There's going to be very few things you're going to do that are going to damage your child or ruin your child, because this is just life and this is just family stuff. And I think the benefit of spending time with you, learning from you, is well worth whatever missteps that you make along the way.
Yeah, 100%. And that's anyone who would be maybe considering to start homeschooling. But what about families who are already homeschooling and feeling really overwhelmed? How would you give them some reassurance to keep going? What would they need to focus on to get that call back to do what they're
Yeah,
doing?
I think it's just really important to ask, why do I think I'm failing right now? What is it that, because sometimes it's not the school at all. It's like, oh, I'm sad because we lost a relative and I don't feel like I'm functioning really much as a parent right now, or I'm going through a difficult relationship with with my spouse, or my kid isn't sitting still long enough to get the math facts. Like those are all very different things, but they can all make you feel like you're not doing homeschool well. So I think you really just need to say, what is it that I am not doing that I think I'm failing? And a lot of times this mom will go, everything. I'm failing at everything.
Yeah.
Nothing is working, because you feel everything and you take on the weight of everything. But a lot of times it's not a homeschool problem. And what I always say too is, almost all homeschool problems are parenting problems. It's not the curriculum, right? It's maybe the relationship with your child is strained, or you haven't figured out the boundaries, or you haven't figured out, just feeling like you have the authority to tell your kid to do these things that you haven't been doing. Those are parenting and relational issues. So that might be a time to ask a therapist or a trusted family friend or a faith leader or somebody that you trust to be like, I'm struggling to communicate with my child. I'm struggling to, because it usually is not math. It's not the program. It's not the book. It's a parenting conflict. And we need to work those out just for the sake of our relationship with our children. And homeschooling is just kind of bringing that to light because we're together so much. So figure out what that is, work on that. It might be a short-term thing. It might be a long-term thing, but it's almost never the homeschool.
Yeah,
That's the
and what I
problem.
get really is to trust yourself, trust your gut, trust what you see, connect with your intuition, but also don't be afraid to ask for help,
Yeah.
because sometimes an external opinion can be really what you need to
Yeah.
get you to see things. What is it that I can't see myself? I'm
Right.
just hitting a wall and like, okay, bring some light into the situation. I'd like to, for two questions just to end this.
Yeah.
If there was a takeaway for this episode, most important things, okay, just listen to these two things. What would that be?
Oh boy. The two things are that homeschooling is becoming so popular and it's growing so fast that there is someone out there that shares your perspective, values, and goals. You just need to find them. So connect, but don't feel like the people that you read online that are all the experts or in the Facebook groups or whatever is the advice you have to take. They don't know you. They don't know your family. They don't know your unique needs. You left the school system maybe because it didn't help you customize to your child's unique needs. So someone that doesn't know your family is not necessarily going to be the right person to guide you in that. That said, you have plenty of time to try things, make mistakes, try again, because your time with your child is so concentrated. You can get things done in 2 to 3 hours versus 8 because there's not all that back and forth between classes and moving around and waiting for Jimmy in the corner to be quiet so we can start our math test. The time you have is so concentrated. So the other thing is don't feel like you have to get it all done and spend 8+ hours doing something. It does not take that much time. Yeah, 2 things. Find your people. Avoid online if you can, unless you use that to find a real life person, right? And then don't feel like you're behind because you have a lot of time to do this and your time is quality time.
Yeah, that's really reassuring. I'd just like to ask you something. I'd like to start something brand new with this episode as we end this episode. And I'd like you to leave a question for the next guest. And
Oh.
this question is, what would you have liked someone to ask your younger self that would have helped you understand something that at that time would have been really beneficial for you to understand where you were going?
What would I want my younger self
Yeah.
to know?
Yeah.
I used to think that I had to have all these things done before I could be a good mom. I had to have a clean house, nice house, have all my problems fixed with my emotions and my family relations, and that once everything was all sorted, I could be a good mom. And that's not true. If we waited for that, we'd be 102 and we'd be dead and we'd never have children. I would just say that the best gift you can give your children then is to watch you fail and get back up and do it again. Start whenever you're ready. And be okay with showing yourself to your children because they model how to make it and get up and do it again. And so they actually need to see that. So you don't have to have it all perfect and in place. And actually that's a detriment to your children.
Yeah.
To try.
Yeah. I love that. And I think, starting when you're ready, I think you're ready when you're considering something. Just take action because you're never going to feel ready. But if you're considering doing something, that just shows you are ready to start taking action and start making mistakes. Show them that's okay. Yeah. Thank you so much, Linsey. That was beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you.
And I'd love to homeschool my children, but I also they love going to school. We don't do homework, so it's always finding that balance. I write notes every day. They didn't do their homework because they were playing outside. They were climbing trees. They were on play dates. But it's about really trusting yourself, I think, and what works for you, for your family. And there's no right or wrong when it comes to education. Right. It's what works for you. And just because they tell you and they have this experience or these degrees, or just you trust what you're doing, trust that you know your children, and spend that quality time to really get to know them so you can make the right decisions for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's, again, parenting. It's a parenting decision. It's a parenting opportunity. It's not an education is parenting. So yeah, definitely what your family needs, and you have to trust yourself with that. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.